Sage Empresses of the century Emperor Li Shimin of the Tang Dynasty. Empress Chang's son in 600 AD, Chang's son Chang, a general of the Sui Dynasty, had a new daughter in his family, who was treated as a jewel in the palm of his hand. She loved to read and learned a lot from her childhood, and later became the Empress of Emperor Li Shimin of the Tang Dynasty. The Chang sons were responsible for the Tang Dynasty's prosperity during Emperor Li Shimin's reign. The Changsung clan's reputation for virtue and integrity. The Chang sons were from Luoyang, Hunan province. Their ancestors were originally from the Tuoba clan of the Northern Wei dynasty. But after the Sinicization of the Northern Wei dynasty, this clan changed its name to Changsung. Born into a family of officials and eunuchs, Changsung received an orthodox education in Han culture from an early age. And as she grew up, she gradually developed a virtuous, gentle, upright, and kind character. Changsung's father, Changsung Sheng, was a general of the primary guard during the Sui dynasty, and was well known at the time for his ability to write and fight. His mother, Jiao, was also from a famous family, and her father, Jiao Jingd, was the assassin of Yang Yo. When Changsung was a child, a fortune teller once told her fortune, saying that she Kun carries all things, virtue and boundless. Fulfill the middle of the house in the Shun, noble and unspeakable, and then the truth was not far from what the fortune teller said. When Changsung was 13, she married Li Shimin, who was 17. Li Shimin's father was Li Yuan, the governor of Taiyuan at the time, and Li Shimin was his second son. He was very literate, liked to practice martial arts, and was favored by Li Yuan. Changsung was from a big family, but after marrying Li Shimin, she was filial and respectful, not arrogant, and kept a low profile. Although young, she could fulfill her duties as a woman, and she served her parents-in-law with great care and devotion. Later, when Changsung and Li Shimin had a child, she became even more diligent in raising her children and taking good care of her family. Later, when Li Yuan rose up, the 21-year-old Li Shimin accompanied his father on his campaigns and made remarkable achievements. Changsung travels with her husband, takes care of Li Shimin's food and clothing, do their best. All the big and small affairs of the family, Changsung are handled in a well-organized manner so that Li Shimin has no worries. Li Yuan is also delighted with this daughter-in-law, and often in front of the family praise her. Not long after, Li Yuan ascended to the throne of heaven in Chang'an, and became the founder of the Tang Dynasty Tangaozi. Li Yuan made Li Shimin the king of Qin, who was responsible for controlling the troops and forces in the eastern part of the country, and ordered Li Shimin to sweep away the opposing forces. Within a few years, Li Shimin, by virtue of his outstanding talents, swept away all the remnants of the opposing forces, and completed the unification of the Tang Dynasty. During Li Shimin's campaigns in the north and south, Changsung clan followed her husband closely, and went to great lengths to care for his living and other affairs. In August of the 9th year of the Tang Dynasty, Li Yuan abdicated his throne to Crown Prince Li Shimin because of his advanced age. Li Shimin became the emperor, and the country flourished under his rule. The country began to flourish under his rule, and Changsung became the Empress Changsung. But she still did not change her excellent character. She was never arrogant and haughty, and she maintained the virtue of being virtuous, respectful, and frugal as she always had been. This is also in line with the earlier prophecy of Kun carries all things by the diviner. For the old idol Emperor Li Yuan, she is very respectful service. Every morning and evening must go to ask for peace, and always reminds the emperor beside the palace maid how to take care of his life, and live like an ordinary daughter-in-law with filial piety. In the Tang Dynasty, there were many consorts. In addition to the Empress, there were also 4 wives, 9 concubines, 27 women, and 81 imperial ladies. In almost every dynasty, there were cases of concubines competing for favor, but during the reign of Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty, very few such cases were attributed to Empress Changsung's enlightenment. This was because Empress Changsung was enlightened. With her dignified and benevolent character, she influenced and touched the concubines around her without saying a word, and made the whole harem harmonious. As a result, Emperor Tang Taizong could concentrate on military affairs, without the interference of the harem, a virtue that he respected. Empress Chang was very tolerant and obedient to the concubines in the harem. She did not strive for exclusive favor because of her status as the empress, but she routinely advised Emperor Tang to treat every concubine in the harem fairly. Instead, she routinely advised Tang to treat every concubine fairly. In the palace, however, Empress Chang paid great attention to the friendship between concubines and treated the children born to other concubines as if they were her own. When the Duke of Yuzheng lost his mother early, Empress Chang adopted her and treated her more affectionately than her daughter. When the concubines were sick, she arranged for the imperial doctors to come and treat them, and the people in the palace loved her. Empress Chang also compiled the best deeds of ancient women into a 10-volume book called Women's Rules, for which she wrote a preface. When she read the history books and saw the deeds of Empress Ma of Emperor Mingdi of the Han Dynasty, she wrote an essay to criticize her faults, believing that she favored the relatives and allowed them to dominate in the court, which was the root cause of her misfortune. After the death of Empress Chang Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty read the whole book and doubled his mourning, and led the book as a code of conduct for the concubines in the harem. And later on, the women's rules became the norms and codes that women competed with each other to abide by at that time. The emperor's ruling husband, Empress Chang liked to read and often talked with Emperor Tang Taizong about the past and present, so she could also put forward her own opinions, giving Emperor Tang Taizong a lot of help. The truth is that Empress Chang gave Tang Taizong a lot of good advice on political affairs and personnel. The reign of Emperor Tang Taizong was one of the most glorious times in Chinese history, known as the rule of Shangguan. While the formation of the Shengxi was closely related to the personal ability of Emperor Tang Taizong, it was also closely related to a group of outstanding ministers and assistants around him. The unity of these talents was inseparable from the efforts of Empress Chang because Empress Chang behavior was upright and righteous. Emperor Tang Taizong also valued her very much. So after returning to the harem, he often talked with her about military affairs and details of rewards and punishments. Empress Chang always abided by the rule of not interfering with politics in the harem, saying, "It is not right for a hen to take charge of the mourning, and it is also inauspicious for a woman to hear about political affairs." However, Emperor Tang Taizong insisted on listening to her views, and Empress Chang could not be persuaded, so she could only say, "Thinking of danger in times of peace and security, appointing wise men and accepting their advice is all that is required, but I do not know about the rest of it." She put forward the principles and did not want to bind her husband, wanted to avoid binding details. Li Shimin remembered his wife's words, "Think of danger in times of peace and accept advice from the wise." In the aspect of thinking of danger in times of peace, when the world was already at peace and many military generals gradually began to neglect to practicing martial arts, Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty often summoned military officials to practice shooting skills in the spare time of his official duties, which was called as a pastime, but in fact, it was a way of urging them to practice their martial arts diligently, and the results of the drills were used as essential references for their promotion and rewards. His style of appointing people based on merit and employing them without any doubt was deeply supported by the civil and military officials under his command. As a result, all of them encouraged themselves and did not dare to be negligent. And even in the peaceful and stable period, they did not let down their guard, and the country was always well fortified and robust. They were not afraid of any external aggression at all. Tang Taizong deeply benefited from the appointment of wise men and their advice. Wei Zheng, the counselor under him, was a straightforward man who dared to criticize. Wei Zheng often pointed out some improper behaviors and policies of Emperor Tang Taizong to his face and urged him to correct them. So Emperor Tang Taizong was in awe of him and often called him the Minister of Loyalty and Admonition. However, sometimes Wei Zheng refuted Tang Taizong's opinions in front of his courtiers, which made Tang Taizong feel very uncomfortable. On one occasion, Wei Zheng refuted Emperor Tang Taizong's opinions in public in the imperial court. Emperor Tang Taizong was so annoyed that when he returned to the harem, he was still furious and said to Empress Chang with a face full of anger, "Wei Zheng, this country bumpkin often embarrasses me. and I will have to kill him. Empress Changsun seldom saw Emperor Taizong angry. After hearing this, she did not make a sound, but went to her chambers to dress up and then came out wearing the queen's gown, and solemnly bowed to Emperor Tang Taizong 3 times 9 times, saying, "Congratulations, Your Majesty." "Congratulations, Your Majesty." Tang Taizong was very surprised and did not know why, so he asked where the joy came from. Empress Changsun said, "I heard that the Lord is bright before the minister straight, now Weijing straight. So it can be seen that His Majesty is bright, so I congratulate His Majesty." Emperor Tang Taizong was stunned, and then realized what Empress Changsun meant, and all his grievances disappeared, and he paid more attention to Weijing's opinion. Empress Changsun saved Weijing, analyzed the people's reasoning, and praised Emperor Taizong so that he could not be convinced. Later, Emperor Taizong of Tang even praised Weijing in front of his ministers in the courtroom, saying, "People say that Weijing is rude, but as I see it, it is what is lovely about him." Empress Changsun not only praised Weijing verbally, but also sent someone to reward Weijing and sent her message to him. Say, "I have heard that you are very upright, and now it seems that you are so I am rewarding you. And you should insist on doing so." With the support and encouragement of Empress Changsun, Weijing became even more loyal and tried his best, and often advised the emperor and his ministers in the court without any fear of offending them. Because of such a courageous and loyal counselor, Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty could avoid many mistakes and become a wise king. In the final analysis, Empress Changsun was responsible for this. The elder brother of Empress Changsun, Changsun Wuji, was a close friend of Emperor Tang Taizong and had followed him in his campaigns from a very early age. After Tang Taizong took the throne, he favored him and made him the prime minister. But Queen Changsun knew about it and strongly disagreed. She emphasized that as the queen, she was already very honored, and she did not want her brothers and nephews to become prominent officials in the court, and cited the precedent of the rebelliousness of Empress Lu's family in the Han Dynasty as an example of her strong opposition. However, Emperor Tang Taizong did not think so. He thought that Changsun Wuji should be appointed as the chancellor based on his merits and talents, and that he should be appointed without avoiding his relatives and should only be utilized his talents. So he appointed Changsun Wuji as the general of the left marquis, the minister of the Ministry of Appointments, and the right servant of the Ministry of Appointments Chancellor. Empress Changsun had no choice but to discuss with Changsun Wuji privately, hoping that he would decline the appointment and not take up the post. Changsun Wuji was also very concerned about his relationship with Empress Changsun and was unwilling to take up the post of Prime Minister. As a last resort, Emperor Taizong had to make him the 3rd secretary of the Kaifu Yutong, a very high position, but he was not in charge of the actual political affairs. Changsun Wuji still refused, thinking that he was a relative, and if he took up such a high position, he was afraid that the world would say he was a private person. Emperor Tang Taizong said, "I choose my officials based on their talents. If there is no talent, although relatives do not use it, if there is talent, hatred is not avoided." Weijing is an example. Weijing is an example. Today's move is not a personal favor. Changsun Wuji also thought it was reasonable, so he agreed. Empress Changsun was very happy that her brother did not care about power, so she said nothing more. At that time, Feng Xuanling was repatriated to his hometown because of his faults. Empress Chang's son appreciated his talent and hoped Emperor Tang Taizong would reuse him. At this time, Empress Changsun was already on her deathbed, but she did not forget about state affairs. She said, "Feng Xuanling has been with your majesty for a long time. He is a careful and meticulous person with great wisdom. He is a rare talent. If there is no big mistake, I hope your majesty can reuse him. I hope your majesty can reappoint him if there is no major fault. I also hope that your majesty can be close to the gentlemen and keep away from the villains. Adopt the advice of the loyal ministers and keep away from the slanderous words of the villains. Reduce the people's labor. Develop the production, and make the country rich and strong so that I will have no regrets even after I die." Tang Taizong nodded and reappointed Feng Xuanling as the prime minister not long after the death of Empress Changsun, who, as Empress Changsun had told him, contributed a great deal to the formation of the great Tang dynasty. Frugality and integrity. Empress Chang came from a noble family, but was never extravagant and lived a frugal and simple life. Like her predecessors, she didn't emphasize luxurious clothes and articles. Her diet was simple, and occasionally she would invite guests, but she was never ostentatious, and she also implemented the policy of cutting down expenses in the harem, and all the extra expenses could be removed by all means. Empress Chang led by example. The harem naturally formed a culture of reverence for simplicity. After the reign of Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty, Empress Chang's eldest son, Li Chengqian, was established as the crown prince. As the crown prince was young, Empress Chang left his wet nurse, Mrs. Sui, in charge of the daily expenses of the Eastern Palace of the Crown Prince. At that time, the palace was practicing a system of frugal spending, and naturally, the Crown Prince's palace was no exception. Therefore, Mrs. Suyan often complained in front of Empress Chang that the Crown Prince was the future king, and should be supported by all people in the world, but now the daily expenses were too tight, and everything looked too shabby. And she repeatedly asked for an increase in the daily expenses of the Crown Prince's residence. Empress Chang was also very fond of Crown Prince Li Chengqian, but was not lenient. Instead, she said, being the Crown Prince, the future is long, the patient is not established in virtue, but not in fame. So why do you suffer from the shortage of goods and insufficient expenses? After hearing this, Mrs. Suyan stopped talking. Empress Chang's daughter, Princess Chang, was the jewel of Emperor Tang Taizong's crown, and had been favored by him since she was a child, and had been treated with dignity and respect and appeared very pampered. When she got married, Princess Chang asked her father to double her dowry compared to that of Princess Yongjie, who had been married before. Princess Yongjie was the sister of Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty, and her dowry was relatively simple because she was married at a time when the Tang Dynasty was still in its early years. When Princess Chang married, the Tang Dynasty was in its prime, so it was not too much to ask for more dowry, and Emperor Tang Taizong agreed. However, Wei Zheng remonstrated with Tang Taizong, arguing that it would be inappropriate for the dowry of Princess Chang to exceed that of Princess Yongjie. He thought that since ancient times, there was an order between the eldest and the youngest, and there were rules and regulations, so he hoped that Emperor Tang Taizong would withdraw his order, and would not give others a chance to take advantage of him. After returning to the palace, Tang Taizong inadvertently told Empress Chang what Wei Zheng had said. After listening to his words, Empress Chang found them very reasonable and said, "I have often heard that His Majesty thinks highly of Wei Zheng, but I do not know why." Today, after listening to his advice, she realized that he helped his master by applying propriety and righteousness without showing favoritism. "I have been married to your Majesty with deep love and affection. Every time I speak, I have to see whether your Majesty is pleased before I dare to speak, and I never dare to take offense easily." Wei Zheng, as a subject, can say so, which is rare. How can your Majesty not listen to him? After hearing this, Emperor Tang Taizong also found it very reasonable. Therefore, the dowry of Princess Chang when she got married could have been more generous. In the 8th year of the reign of Emperor Zhang Guan, Empress Chang accompanied Emperor Tang Taizong on a tour of the Chuqing Palace, a summer resort at that time. One night, an emergency arose when someone reported that there was a mutiny among the guards. When Emperor Tang Taizong heard about this, he immediately came out to inspect the palace with weapons in his hand. Fearing that Emperor Tang Taizong might be in danger, Empress Chang stood before Emperor Tang Taizong herself. Fortunately, there was no major incident. Empress Chang's health was not good before she went out on patrol, and this time, she was frightened and infected with wind cold, which caused a relapse of her old illness. And although she took a lot of medicines, her condition still did not get better. Crown Prince Li Chengqian, who was serving beside her, asked Emperor Tang Taizong to grant amnesty to the prisoners, and send them to a Taoist temple to pray for blessings for the Empress to get rid of her illness. Although this was not by the rules of etiquette, the ministers all agreed. Even a straightforward person, Wei Zheng, did not object to this request, as they were all very grateful to Empress Chang for her great virtue. However, Empress Chang said, "People's life and death have their destinies, and wealth and riches are in the hands of heaven, not in the hands of human beings. If I can prolong my life by doing this, I have never done any evil deeds. Now that doing good deeds has no effect, what is the use of seeking blessings? The Taoist temple is a quiet place. Don't let it be disturbed because of me. Pardoning prisoners is an essential matter for the state. Don't let me, a woman, mess up the law of the world. All the people were moved to tears. Later, the courtiers submitted several petitions to ask for amnesty, but Empress Chang blocked all of them. And Emperor Tang had no choice but to stop according to her wishes. Empress Chang became increasingly ill and finally died in the summer of the 10th year of Zhangguan. She only lived to be 36 years old. In her last moments, she entrusted Tang with a few things, again showing her deep sense of justice. First, she advised Tang not to let the relatives take up prominent positions to prevent them from interfering with the imperial government with too much power, and at the same time, for their safety. However, Emperor Tang failed to remember the last words of Empress Chang and made Chang Wuji the Prime Minister and Minister of Care in his old age. Chang Wuji, forgetting Empress Chang's advice, took over the government and was later killed by Wu Zixun. Empress Chang saw this possibility in the fate of her predecessors, and in the end, as expected, she had the foresight to realize it. Secondly, she requested to be buried thinly after her death and to keep everything simple. Empress Chang said, I lived a frugal and simple life when I was alive, so I can't afford to be wasteful now that I'm dying. And it is enough to bury the dead, but not to let people see it. It is enough to keep the dead out of sight. Since ancient times, sages and sages have always advocated thin burials. But only the bold and dim-witted rulers have built whole mountains and tombs, wasting the world's money and being laughed at by the learned people of the world. The only thing I want is to be buried in the mountains, with no need to raise a grave or use a coffin or coffin, and to use only wooden tiles and tiles to send of the dead frugally so that I will not be forgotten. Empress Chang one of the most influential people in the world, was still compassionate to the people and practiced frugality when she was dying, which was rarely seen in history. With her virtuous character and selfless behavior, Empress Chang won Emperor Taizong's admiration of the Tang Dynasty and the whole world. She set up a model of a good wife and a good queen for future generations. At the time of Emperor Gaozong, she was honored with the title Empress Wenli Shunqing. Regardless of their position, historians of later generations have rarely praised her from different angles.